Hey everybody, Tyler Howell here, owner and general manager at Hope Property Management in Denver, Colorado. And today we're talking about something that if you've got a rental property for rent or you're trying to rent one out, you're probably seeing this as you're looking at competing properties, is what is more effective? Adjusting my rent price or adding these concessions. Everybody's seeing these rent concessions. What does that mean? A concession is free rent at the end of the day. That's what it is. It's typically a certain number of free weeks or months that you give somebody as an incentive to sign a lease for your property. It's a competitive edge to try to incentivize somebody to sign your lease rather than one of the thousands of comparable competing units. So, which is more effective, lowering my rate or adding that incentive? And the bottom line of what we're about to talk about for the next couple minutes is that they're both necessary in this market. So Denver, Colorado right now, and a lot of large metros around the United States right now are in an interesting rental market where we have very high rental demand, very high rental inventory. Still pretty good demand because we see, mortgage interest rates in the mid sixes, and potential buyers are they're less enthusiastic about buying at those rates, so they're going to rent longer. So yeah, there's good rental demand, but if we look at the supply and demand curve, supply is outpacing it, so it's a very competitive rental market where you're having to have a very compelling argument, a very great deal in order for that prospective renter to sign your lease rather than another lease. So we look at the effectiveness of those two approaches. Do I just lower my rent rate or do I add concessions? And the answer to that is you have to do both. Let's start with your rent rate. You can't have an unreasonable or stretch goal on your rent rate because it's simply not going to happen in a competitive market. You can try and wait for that unicorn renter who their Aunt Sally lives across the street and they got to be their caretaker and they absolutely have to live on that street. That kind of person is not a good bet to just wait at a too high rate for that person to show up because statistically, it's never going to happen. So you have to look at comps in your market on a site like Zillow and figure out what is a good, competitive, reasonable starting rent rate. Now, once you list the property at a certain rate, let's say $2,500 a month, you don't have to leave it there and you shouldn't. So if you're not booking tours at least a couple per week, the market is telling you your price is too expensive. So you have to come down with that base rate. Typically increments of $100 is reasonable. So you never want to leave your rent price just stagnant for week after week after week when you're not booking tours because you're ignoring what the market is telling you. So once you have your property set at the given rent rate, what a good approach is to alternate the lowering of the base rent rate with the addition and increase of a rent concession. So let me give you an example. Let's say that we list a property at $2,500 a month and we don't book any tours after a week. We then lower that property to $2,400 a month and we still don't book any, or we've only booked one, or they're not promising, or they kind of dismissed us. Then that next adjustment is going to be adding a concession. Typically, to start with a half month's rent in this market is a good starting point because you got to think about the tenant or the prospective tenant psychology. That there's a difference these two things are appealing in different ways of saving a little chunk of change every month versus saving a large chunk of change right up front because I got a free half month or I got a free month. And what we're seeing is both of those are being used widely in markets like Denver, where inventory is huge. You need to do both. So if you're the owner of a one or a two bedroom condo, you're competing directly with apartments and they are wildly overbuilt in Denver. So do yourself a little experiment. Go on Zillow and set a one bedroom only filter and zoom out to the whole metro and see how many one bedroom units are available today in Denver. It's about 15,500. And we're in early mid-March. That's very unusual. Those apartment buildings are giving away almost universally 8 to 12 weeks of free rent just to get a lease signed. So if you're an owner of a one or a two bedroom property, you are, even if you're a townhouse or a row home, you are directly competing with those apartment buildings, which are almost exclusively one and two bedrooms. They have amenities that you probably don't have. So, whereas you might have a garage and might not have people stacked on top of each other, they have a free gym, pool, and hot tub and are giving away 2.5 months of free rent. So if you're the owner of a 3 or 4 bedroom single family home, you're in a better spot because the number of inventory or competing units that are on the market right now is significantly lower than our 1 and 2 bedroom segment, but it's still high. So don't think that just because you own a 3 or 4 bedroom townhome or single family home that you're not going to have to do a concession. You may not, but it's a good idea to kind of mix that in with the adjustment of your prices so that you're not just continuing to lower the base rent. Throw a little cherry on top that gives them a big chunk of change back in their pocket in a single lump sum in the form of waived rent up front. These are very valuable to renters. They're used to seeing it on today's market. And you may be in a scenario where, hey, why would I sign for your unit? I even like it more, but I can get this great deal with this other unit. I'm going to sign because I get a free month. All right. So takeaway, use both of those. If you have any questions on the current rental market in Denver or really anywhere else, give us a call here at Whole PM 720-737-1373.